think that's a good sound. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for coming together and participating. Thank you to our incredible panel, as well as everyone that's watching and listening, whether you're watching and listening live or you're coming back and checking out the recording. We have a really cool topic and a hot button issue, perhaps. And I know we're going to probably step on our toes and put our foot in our mouth probably by saying the wrong thing at some point today. So hopefully everyone comes at this with the expectation and desire to be engaged and learn something new. We just want to start off by thanking, first off, the Bird Bath, which is our podcast that puts these things together. We're a news source, as well as our sponsor, Covet. One little disclaimer that I want to put out there is Covet and the Bird Bath, we don't have a side on this. We're here to bring the topics and the ideas to you all, to our industry. And I think we've brought together a really, really cool panel of incredible people. So what I'll do, I'm going to jump right in and go ahead and introduce our different panelists. I'm going to start with my left side here, Dr. Gail Golub. Dr. Golub's the Associate Executive Vice President and Chief Veterinary Officer at the AVMA. Dr. Golub, do you want to give us a quick intro about yourself?
Correct. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity, Ryan. I think this is going to be a great conversation. Looking forward to it. So I have been employed with the AVMA for a number of years. I'm currently responsible for working with more than 450 volunteers with a team that create policy for the association. So incredible access to volunteers and expertise. Prior to the AVMA, and actually part of the time I've been working for the AVMA, I also spent in private companion animal clinical practice.
Wonderful. Well, looking forward to having you, and thank you for joining us. Now, Dr. Wayne Jensen is also with us. Dr. Wayne is a professor in the Department of Clinical Sciences at Colorado State University. Dr. Jensen, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself as well?
Yeah, let's see. I'm a 1984 graduate of Colorado State University. Yes, so I had my 40th reunion this year. It was awesome to see some classmates. I've had a varied career in the veterinary profession. I worked in research. I worked for industry. With my wife, who's also a veterinarian, we owned a private practice for over 20 years. Very proud to say it was the 2012 AHA Practice of the Year. And then also academia. I've been working at CSU for about the last 10 or 11 years, 7 of which I was the department head, and I stepped down from that about a year and a half ago. So.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. We also have Ashley Selke, who's a CVT RVT. She's the immediate past president at NAVTA, North American Veterinary Technician Association. I hope I said all of those words correctly. I messed it up. Oh no, I'm canceled now. But immediate past president is an RVT board member of the Indiana Veterinary Medical Board, and she's on the legislative committee at the CVPA. Ashley, you can correct me now.
NAVTA is the National Association of Veterinary Technicians in America.
The A's. There's too many A's. My bad.
But no, that's okay. It used to be the North American Veterinary. But good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ashley Selke. I'm honored to be a part of this discussion today. I bring over 15 years of experience in the veterinary profession with a background as a credentialed veterinary technician and commitment to advancing our field. Currently, I serve as an instructional technologist at Purdue University College of Veterinary Medicine. I hold a seat on the Indiana Board of Veterinary Medicine, where I was appointed by Governor Holcomb. In my journey, I had a privilege of holding leadership roles across multiple state technician associations, including serving as the immediate past president, which you said, of NAVTA. I also created the chair and created the NAVTA Government Relations Committee. It didn't exist before, and which has been instrumental in shaping legislative initiatives for veterinary technicians in over 35 states. And throughout my career, my focus has been for advocating for credentialed veterinary technicians, elevating their roles, and addressing systemic issues within the profession. I'm here today to share insights and work collaboratively on solutions that will benefit our entire veterinary team and the animals we serve. And I just want to say that although NAVTA placed me on this CVPA committee, I will not be speaking for NAPTA. I will not be speaking for any other boards besides the CVPA. And that's what I'm here today.
Great. Well, and we'll wrap it up for the introductions with last but not least, as always, last in the alphabet, first in our heart, Dr. Link Wellborn. Link is the Chief Executive Officer at VMG, as well as the Chief Veterinary Officer at Covetrus. Link, why don't you give us a little background also?
Okay. Thanks, Ryan, and thanks for the opportunity to join you today. I'm certainly looking forward to the conversation. So I own 8 AHA accredited independent practices in Tampa, and I see patients in one of those practices part-time pretty much every week that I'm in town. I'm also a member of the Veterinary Innovation Council, and I, as you indicated, serve as Chief Veterinary Officer for Covetrus, and I'm one of the founders and the current CEO of the Veterinary Management Groups.
Wonderful. Well, I hope that our panel here shows the breadth and the depth of people that we're expecting to bring to the conversation here. And what I wanted to do was open with just 2 minutes. I think there's going to be a lot of different conversations pulling from different places, but I thought it would be great to give each one of you just 2 minutes to talk about your position on the mid-level practitioner role, the VPA role, the different new placement of a potential new member of the veterinary community, and where you, as well as if you're speaking for an organization or a company, where you all see that. So I'll go in the same order. Dr. Gale, why don't you kick us off? I'll give you 2 minutes here, but I'm going to keep us tight on it because I want to be really respectful for everyone's time.
So great. Thanks very much, Brian. Appreciate it. So I think most of you probably know that AVMA has been really concerned, actually, about proposals to create a mid-level practitioner. We believe the role is unnecessary and that it's redundant because it overlaps with duties that are already being performed by veterinarians and veterinary technicians. Particularly troubling to us is the insufficient training that is being proposed for this role. And so essentially the mid-level would be practicing core aspects of veterinary medicine, including diagnosing, prognosing, creating treatment plans, and even performing surgery after completing a mere 65 credit hour master's program. And more than half of that mid-level's training would be delivered online. And that would be followed by 1 semester only of in-person training and a very short internship. And what this means is that their clinical exposure would actually be less than 1/3 of what veterinarians currently receive. And it's also actually less than what veterinary technicians receive. And one of the other things that concerns us is that it's been stated that these mid-levels will actually be able to work with horses and food animals, despite the fact that they'll receive little to no training in species beyond dogs and cats. And so the mid-levels also face some pretty significant functional limitations. They can't prescribe medications because federal law prohibits that. That means they're not going to be able to fully and properly care for their patients. And for students pursuing the mid-level degree, the outlook isn't much better. They're going to be accruing a substantial amount of debt for a degree with uncertain job prospects because most veterinarians that we have spoken with are hesitant to employ these individuals due to liability concerns. And it's telling that virtually every major veterinary association in the US, along with veterinary specialists, practice owners, shelter veterinarians, the American Humane Association, and the American Kennel Club, also oppose creating a mid-level practitioner. And in 2023, AVMA conducted a survey of pet owners, and they too want a properly trained professional to deliver their animals' care. So from AVMA's perspective, we think that rather introducing this risky new role, it'd be much better to focus on really leveraging our veterinary technicians, optimizing their role, preparing opportunities for advancement, and all doing these things will allow us to address our workforce challenges safely and effectively.
Thanks, Gail. I appreciate your opinions there and your side of everything. Ashley, why don't we hear from you?
Yes. So this important conversation, I like to say the veterinary professional associate because that's what we're talking about today. And the mid-level professional or mid-level role has gotten a negative connotation to it. But as far as the veterinary professional associate role, we're here today because the veterinary profession is at a crossroads. And it's time to address systemic challenges that have gone unaddressed for far too long. And for decades, veterinary technicians have faced barriers to career advancement, suppressed wages, a lack of representation in critical decision-making forums. Meanwhile, our industry struggles with workforce shortages, rising costs, and limited access to care in underserved areas. So we have to stop history from repeating itself with harmful rhetoric against progress. Credentialed technicians are the backbone of the veterinary profession, yet we've seen them undervalued and overworked, with resources taken from them without meaningful reinvestment. And it's time to uplift and elevate these professionals, not suppress their contributions. And to the AVMA and other organizations, I say this: to stop the fear-based campaigns and the suppression of non-veterinarians, and let's build solutions that work for everyone. The VPA role was created not to replace veterinarians, but to address gaps in care, complement the existing team, and provide a career pathway for technicians and science-trained professionals who are ready to do more. This role was not designed in isolation. It reflects collaboration from every corner of the veterinary team, which is unlike the historical prospects that we've dealt with in veterinary medicine. This role, it reflects collaboration with veterinarians, VTSs, educators, diplomats, and technicians alike. The challenges we face as a profession are significant, but they are not insurmountable. Together, we have the opportunity to address workforce shortages, improve access to care, and enhance the future of veterinary medicine. The VPA role is one solution among many, and while it may not be perfect for everyone, everyone does not have to decide to do it. And the VPA role is a solution. And so let's approach this discussion with open minds and shared commitment to building a better profession for all of us, instead of just seeing who it benefits more.
Thanks, Ashley. Wayne, why don't you give us your 2 minutes as well? Wayne, do I have you still?
I'm sorry, were you saying Link or Wayne?
I was saying Wayne. Sorry.
Oh,
No, that's okay.
I thought.
No. Wayne, why don't you give us your 2 minutes, and then we'll wrap them up with Link.
Instead of talking broadly about my personal beliefs as far as the value of a veterinary professional associate or a vet PA, I think I'm going to talk about the program we're developing at CSU. So this is a master's degree program, and I'll be blunt. It's a false narrative to say these individuals are untrained. I would also like to say that no organization, nobody has come to us and says, please show us the details of the program. I'd be happy to do that. And I think I could convince them they won't be undertrained. So the purpose is to train individuals to be supportive of veterinarians by managing the routine tasks, freeing up those veterinarians to manage more complex cases. So these students will receive extensive hands-on education. Now, a lot has been said about, it's, the majority of it's delivered online. Well, for all the gray-haired people in the room, yes, that has a negative connotation. But I can tell you that current technology, it's not asynchronous, passively delivered online education. That would be bad, but it's not. It's active instruction delivered in an online format, and that is more powerful learning than passive instruction given in person. And by the way, I think CSU is not unique amongst veterinary schools, and we record every lecture. Well, guess what? Students don't attend in person. They watch the recordings because they can do it at 2 times the speed. So, using the online education as a negative it's a false narrative. I mean, this is active instruction that's better than passive in-person instruction. Okay, so they will be trained, and that's where we started. We started with the competencies, and we said, okay, this is what we want them to do. And then we went and looked at our DVM education and said, all right, what do we need to make sure is in the curriculum, and what can be excluded? So there's nothing large animal in there, and I need to speak to that. This is strictly, our first program is strictly dogs and cats.
And Wayne, I have a list of questions I'm going to ask you about the curriculum, because I want to give you a fair place to say that. But why don't I do this? Why don't I give Link 2 minutes here just to sort of give his opening views on things? And my first questions I'm asking are about that curriculum because I'd love to set that baseline for everyone. Sound good? Cool. Link, why don't you give us 2 minutes?
Thanks, Ryan. Well, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that some of the advocates of the mid-level
Link, I
practitioner
think there you go. Your sound went down, but you're back.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that some of the advocates for the mid-level practitioners concept, like Wayne Jensen, who I've known for decades, and Ashley are well-intentioned. However, I respectfully disagree that it's the right direction for animal health. And my primary goal today is to represent the perspectives of the 1,800 veterinary management group members that own 2,200 practices across the country. Earlier this year, we surveyed VMG members that are all independent practitioner owners or owners of independent practices to get their thoughts about the CSU Veterinary Professional Associate program. And we went to great lengths to ensure that the survey was objective. And we got a response rate of 37%, which is pretty robust. And what we found is that 72% had either an extremely or somewhat negative view of the CSU program, and 68% were extremely or somewhat negative, even if future graduates could work in their state, meaning that they could employ them. And there were only 14% that thought it wasn't important that applicants be a credentialed technician in order to be admitted to the program, and 59% indicated that there was extremely or very important that they be credentialed technicians before they be admitted to the program. Insufficient training, the ability to perform surgery, liability, and potential negative impacts on credentialed technicians and veterinarians were all major concerns that were expressed in the survey. And almost half of the survey respondents reported that they would not, under any circumstances, hire a VPA in their practices. And that is, there were no changes to the program that would be adequate from their perspective.
All right. Well, thanks, Link. I think that's an interesting place to kick off that first question. So, as we all see, there's very different opinions, and I appreciate the general consensus here that nobody on the panel here has a horns or a tail hiding, right? Everyone is coming at this with their intention of how they feel it best can benefit our industry, and an industry that I think every person on this can agree that we all love and want to see be successful. So it's great to know, Link, you and Wayne have known each other for a long time. Everyone here has probably met each other. So it's great to have that as a baseline. But I want to jump into that first part here of what the actual curriculum, training, and credentialing is going to look like for VPAs at Colorado State in the new master's program.
So as we discussed, the first 3 semesters will be delivered online, but it will be active instruction, not passive instruction. And then there will be the 4th semester will be in person in Fort Collins, and techniques laboratories, hands-on, clinical, using clinical specimens as well. And then the 5th semester will be an internship that they will then essentially self-select where would they like to go. Now, as I was starting to say that, I keep pushing that to make it disappear. We developed this program specifically for the graduates to work in shelters. And the reason for that is in the state of Colorado, shelters are exempt from the Practice Act because they own the animals. That exemption was put in for livestock, but it also applies to shelters. So that's what we were focused on. And CSU did not have a role in Proposition 129. So we, and as state employees, we weren't allowed to advocate one way or the other for it. So, but we developed this program for shelter medicine. Subsequent to the passage of 129, we will be developing a separate program for livestock. Now, even though livestock have that same exemption, the issue is we believe strongly that these individuals need to report to a veterinarian. They need to be supervised by a veterinarian. In the shelter environment, that worked. In the livestock environment, that wouldn't work because they'd have to work for the producer. not for a veterinarian that worked for the producer. So that's that. But we will be developing a separate livestock. So the training for the initial program, which is not yet approved, but it's in the approval process, is focused on dogs and cats. So that excludes a third of the DVM curriculum because that's livestock. We then also, looking at the competencies that a lot of stakeholders reviewed and gave input on, we went into the DVM curriculum and said, okay, this is what they need to know in order to be able to deal with routine conditions, uncomplicated medical and surgical conditions, and everything else was excluded. So that's how we fit it. The one other big chunk that we have was anatomy and physiology is a prerequisite to the program. There's a huge amount of in-depth anatomy and physiology that is taught in the DVM curriculum, and that's appropriate for DVMs. But at the level these individuals will be practicing, they don't need that in-depth anatomy and physiology to manage the routine conditions. So that, in a nutshell, is how the curriculum was developed. And I'll pause.
That's very helpful. And so the term online is used a lot, and it was used a lot in statements from many organizations for, against, and a lot of the comments and things like that. Dr. Golab, when you all look at the accreditation that you do for universities on the DVM side of education, as well as, and Ashley, you may be able to help with the conversation around veterinary technician schools and accreditation there, where does those organizations and those accreditations draw the line on in-person requirements versus online education? I know certain states as well for CE do require in-state or in-person CE as opposed to online CE. Where do both of those organizations that you all are familiar with, if not representing, have a good understanding of?
So Ryan, first of all, I think it's important to understand that there's a fair amount of flexibility in accreditation. And so the colleges have to meet certain standards, but they're given quite a bit of leeway in how they can meet those standards. I think AVMA's concerns with the online curriculum is that you are essentially trying to teach students normal and abnormal simultaneously. So for example, the draft of the curriculum that we have seen for the first semester teaches anatomy and radiology at the same time. It also teaches pathologic basis of disease, and none of those courses are accompanied by laboratories. In order for the student to assimilate that information, you need those laboratories. That anatomical laboratory is incredibly important to teaching veterinary medicine. You definitely have to understand normal before you can understand abnormal. Dr. Jensen mentioned the prerequisites and that the laboratory would be covered there. But what he didn't mention is that if you look at the prerequisites that would be acceptable for this program, they include courses that are also taken entirely online. So we're asking students to understand pathology without them understanding what is fully normal first, and without the physical examples of what that looks like.
Yeah, Wayne, please.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah. No, I want this to be, I want you all to be able to respond as much as possible.
Okay, it's an outdated concept that you cannot have a laboratory given in an online environment. We do that. I mean, the director of the program, Dr. Sherry Lanning, this is her expertise. And she currently teaches anatomy, including laboratories, in an online environment. So, I mean, saying that you have to be in person to be in a laboratory is no longer accurate.
Ashley, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, and I can speak for, I'm here to represent veterinary technicians. And I think what's important about this certain podcast is that we're not just talking about CSU. And one of the big factors that's out there is that there already is a master's in veterinary clinical care at LMU University, and it is only for credentialed veterinary technicians. The only graduates to date, started graduating in December of 23 from the master's in veterinary clinical care, are credentialed veterinary technicians with bachelors. And I know we've talked some about the CSU curriculum, but I wanted to add in the LMU curriculum because it factors in many things that people have concerns with. And so they have their key features is exclusively for credentialed veterinary technicians. It focuses on advanced patient case management, critical thinking, and leadership. It's team taught by veterinary technician specialists, veterinary diplomats, and the courses are tailored to enhance the technician's existing skills without expanding the legal scope of practice at this time. But I wanted to make sure that technicians knew there was a pathway for them and that all that's been out there so far is this one set of things that has been said to them. And there is a pathway for technicians. And as for the curriculum, online curriculum, I teach for Purdue University for the distance learning program, which is completely online. And we teach, we're one of the top rated veterinary technician schools in the country. And we have clinical skills at the end. So how they're saying that laboratories must be accompanied by this, there's different formats to do different things. And I just wanted to make sure that technicians out there knew that there's a pathway for them and there's a place for them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah. And somewhat to that idea, I guess, Link, you mentioned earlier on the response rate, 37% response rate, and then a 72% negative response rate of VMG members that responded of the curriculum within the course, or was that 72% a negative connotation to or negative perception of the actual position?
Yeah, we actually surveyed specifically related to the CSU VPA program. We provided the curriculum. We provided what we believe to be a very objective perspective from the advocates, as well as those that are opposed to the concept that CSU is bringing forward. And we actually hired an independent researcher and expert in survey methodology to make sure that we provided what we could, as much of an objective survey as we possibly could. And we found that, like I said, over 70% of the respondents indicated that they were negative about the CSU program for various reasons.
Unless it was a credentialed veterinary technician route, is what I heard you say.
Say that again, Ashley.
Sorry, go ahead.
When Link was telling his statistics, he also said that they wanted to see it as more of a credentialed technician pathway than the alternate pathway, and I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, there's no question about that. There were only 14% of the respondents that said that being a credentialed technician before they were accepted into the program was not important. And, 59% said it was extremely or very important. So that was a big determinant relative to, the negativity toward for the CSU program in particular.
And I think that raises an important point about differences between the CSU program and the LMU program. And so the LMU program is specifically designed to advance veterinary technicians, and AVMA is very supportive of that. But the LMU program has not been originally designed to do, it doesn't mean it couldn't change, but what it hasn't been designed to do is to change scope of practice for veterinary technicians. And when veterinary technicians come into that program, they come in with clinical exposure. And so that's one of our concerns about the CSU proposed program, is it actually has less clinical exposure than what veterinary technicians received in their own education. And so we'd be very supportive of advancing veterinary technicians.
Yeah, Ashley, go ahead.
And I'd just like to counter that with the CSU program. I've seen the curriculum. It actually has what everybody's worried about is that the clinical in hours. So they will have a 400+ hour clinical internship that ensures graduates are prepared for real world responsibilities. And I'll let Wayne go with that. But the one thing I wanted to add was compared to, because I also work at a veterinary school, when compared to with veterinarians in the small animal realm, they will have 100% of knowledge in that realm. And I will share statistics with the audience afterwards that shows that it is equivalent or more than what veterinarians get in surgical training and while they're in that last year of school. So I'll let Wayne, if I incorrectly said anything, but I'll let Wayne get after that.
Well, I'd just like to address the point about I mean, I'm a huge advocate for supported technicians, and I believe this program will be, like LMU, will be a career pathway for veterinary technicians. It's will require those that have a bachelor's degree, and that's out of our control. We have no control over that. That's a national academic requirement that to get a master's degree, you have to have a bachelor's degree. So there's nothing we can do about it. I'd love someday if we could say, all right, so many years of clinical experience could be counted as equivalent. Maybe we'll develop an entrance exam, but it would still require a huge shift at the university level to say, we're going to allow these individuals to come in without a bachelor's and get a master's, even though we do for the DVM. Our DVM program does not require a bachelor's. But anyway, that's a different subject. But I will say that, you know, as I mentioned, we used to own a practice, and some of the best technicians we ever had went on to veterinary school. And as working at CSU, I see that some of the best veterinary school graduates we have were former technicians. Part of that, I think, is because they understand what technicians can do. But that doesn't mean that the DVM graduates we have that weren't technicians aren't successful veterinarians. So just like we can train DVM students that didn't come in as certified veterinary technicians to be successful veterinarians, we can train vet PAs to be successful if they don't start. They'd have a leg up if they did, but if they don't have it. And one of the reasons that I think this is important is, again, talking about the workforce shortage. We have a shortage. We have a shortage of veterinarians. We have a shortage of technicians. The only way we're going to help address that is to attract new individuals to our profession, not just shuffle the cups around and say, okay, this person's still there. We've got to grow the profession by adding new individuals, and that's why it's not going to be restricted to veterinary technicians.
So that is a wonderful key up to sort of the next question that I have. Gail and I have actually sat down and talked about the shortage many times and looked at a lot of those things. But one statistic that I think is across the board is the understanding that the veterinary colleges acceptance rate is about 10%. So every 100 seats that someone applies for, you get 10% in there. I have personal experience with family having seen people that are fantastic students that apply to veterinary schools and don't get in that first round. A lot of them go on to get a master's in public health, a 1-year master's, or they go to work in practice, or they do something in a gap year to be able to reapply to those schools. Do you see the VPA role within CSU or other paths within the veterinary industry as a way to capture that talent that might have not gotten into a vet school in that first blush? Because we can't say that 90% of those people aren't worth having be part of our industry. I think a lot of them are very, very valuable to continue to have with us. Would it make sense if we were to find a way to be able to capture that 90% of people that might have an alternative path to be able to continue their veterinary education?
And from my perspective, absolutely, this is a pathway to that. These are individuals that have already demonstrated a passion for our profession. They've worked in veterinary practices to get the required experience required of the vet school application. They've applied to veterinary school sometimes more than once. So they've shown us dedication. They want to work in our profession, but they can't get into veterinary school. So this is an alternative path, and it's borne out just from the standpoint that, you know, the people that contact us through the CSU website about the program and say exactly that. It's like, I'm interested in this program, please send me information. And then they give us the history about, I tried to get into veterinary school and I haven't been successful. I still want to be in the profession.
Gail, I can actually jump in with sort of a follow-up question to that a bit, from both the accreditation as well as the AVMA side of things. But the question is that, and a question that came in through the chat here was, do we have a shortage of technicians or a difficulty of retaining and encouraging that participation in the pathways. You need more technicians than you need DVMs. And I'll be the first one, or probably one of the millionth people, to say technicians are wildly underappreciated for the massive amount of work that they do. There's not enough ways that we can say thank you for the massive work that they do. You do need more technicians than DVMs to operate a veterinary clinic. That's a bottom line, no matter what. Does a role, whether it's the LMU program, the CSU program, or other pathways that may come down the line, would those be a way to be able to relieve the strain on both of these roles that we see within the veterinary clinic? We see a strain on the number of DVMs available, even if it's just in rural practices, and we don't think that there's one in urban settings. But we also still see a strain on the number of technicians that we can have staff there. Gail, do you think that's something that another pathway of capturing that 90% of people, or other pathways for people to stay engaged in the industry, would be beneficial?
So Ryan, this is actually something we thought quite a bit about, and it come at it from a couple of different perspectives. One is the veterinary professional associate is also going to need support and assistance, which means that individual is also going to need veterinary technicians. So instead of reducing the need for veterinary technicians, we may actually increase it. One of the other unknowns at this point is what the impact of the VPA might be on the interest of veterinary technicians, future veterinary technicians entering that particular field. Because if you can become a VPA, given the curriculum that CSU is proposing, and essentially with less exposure, less clinical hours than what you would need to become a veterinary technician, actually discourage individuals from entering the field of veterinary technology. So rather than supporting our workforce issues, and in fact could negatively impact those. And so that is something we've been very concerned about. The other thing that has been mentioned here is we have veterinary technicians and we have veterinary technician specialists. And so the opportunities for development of the veterinary technician specialists are huge. And we also don't know what impact this particular role may have on folks that are interested in pursuing that either. And interestingly enough, a lot of the things that the VPA has been talked about doing are things that potentially veterinary technician specialists who already exist and for which we already have approved programs could potentially be doing.
I think that anyone that dipped their toe into this conversation probably spent time looking at human healthcare in some ways, not to be the one that looks to human healthcare for everything, but I was surprised by the absolute number of levels of nursing certifications that exist within the human healthcare space, as well as the fact that there is the PA role in the space. All of the nursing specialties or additional certifications have grown since the 1960s, even post the introduction of the PA role. As well as MD pay has continued to outpace inflation. Is that something that, seeing it having been a upward trend in human medicine, not on the cost or access to care for, the cost of care, that's a different issue, but do we see that human medicine has been able to enact these things with multiple levels of their nurses to it as a counterpoint to our technicians within the field, as well as their doctors, and now this mid-level or PA style role? Is that something that should be a positive view? Link, is that something that VMG discussed with any of the owners as you guys think about looking to our human friends?
We haven't had specific discussions about that, but I think the big differentiation there is that in human healthcare, pretty much anybody that needs care gets care.
Link, will you mute yourself and then turn yourself back on? We just have a kind of a funny. Luckily, none of us are dogs, so it's not killing us. But
Can you hear me now?
a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that the big distinction from human healthcare and veterinary medicine is that in human healthcare, pretty much anybody that needs care gets care. whether or not they have insurance or they can afford it personally. There's a safety net in human healthcare that doesn't exist in veterinary medicine. And while many of the students that are going to come out of the VPA program at CSU the intent is for them to go into shelter medicine, the reality is that a lot of them, probably most of them, are going to go into private veterinary clinics in companion animal practice. And we don't have that same safety net. So the vast majority of our clients still have to pay out of pocket. So I don't think we don't have that ability to slide another position into most veterinary practices today. And if you look at the cyclical nature of veterinary workforce, 10 years ago, we had excess capacity within veterinarians. And I chaired the workforce advisory group for the study that we did in 2013. And there will be a time, I would say for sure, the next 10 years, perhaps within the next 5, we'll have excess capacity with veterinarians again, because market forces are at work. We've got over a dozen new veterinary schools that are coming online, and assuming that they can get adequate faculty members to be able to teach them, we're going to have more veterinarians. And at the same time today, we're seeing decreasing transactions in veterinary practices in this post-pandemic environment. So, I think that the need for an additional position in veterinary practices, certainly in private practices, is I think exaggerated. I think we need to focus, as Gail is pointing out, more on trying, and Ashley as well, we need to be elevating veterinary technicians, certainly talking about the specialty technicians that we already have, trying to elevate them to be able to practice at the level that they should be able to provide care in practices, and pay them at a level that, frankly, they don't have to take a vow of poverty.
It's interesting, Link, that you mentioned the concerns about excess capacity moving forward. I don't know if the rest of you had an opportunity to see it yet or not, but just this week, Brockie published a peer-reviewed, the only peer-reviewed research out there looking at what the future will look like in veterinary medicine as far as workforce is concerned. And they have predicted a growth rate for veterinarians that is in excess of the growth rate of the number of households of pets, disposable income, et cetera. So that specter of there potentially being excess capacity sometime in the next 10 years is very real.
So I'm going to call on Ashley and Wayne here. I don't want us to spend too much time just debating the workforce shortage or not workforce shortage, because otherwise I would have made Jim Lloyd come on the call as well to have him give me some fun numbers too. But I want us to focus really perhaps on where this is going to impact, because the law has passed in Colorado. Wayne is working on a program. The LMU program exists. Other states are discussing this. Obviously, we wouldn't be having this caliber of a panel if it was just sort of a blip on the radar. I want to give just Ashley a moment, though, to really address the concerns of technicians. If you could you just elaborate on the perception that you're getting from your network of technicians that you get to participate in? And obviously, I know you're one person, you can't speak for an entire sector of our very important industry, but I do think that you have a wonderful pulse on that. Could you give us some more insights on the technician's experience within this?
Yes. While it's very important that, I think, because our conversations have changed so much, I was like, I can answer this. But to speak on behalf of technicians, we are not retaining them. And there's a reason why. And one of the big things is I wanted to kind of delve into a little bit of the history of technicians and make that kind of perspective for everyone, and in 1972, AVMA hesitated to adopt the term veterinary technician for fearing confusion with veterinarians. So this is a constant fear battle that we've had to deal with for 50 years. It's which led to the interim title animal health technician. And it wasn't until several years later, in 1981, NAPTA wanted to promote and protect the profession, yet it took till 1989 for AVMA to formally adopt the term veterinary technician, because then they could start credentialing our programs. And in 1994, as Link was talking about the veterinary technician specialist, I quote from a JAVMA article that a veterinarian said, "What is the profession coming to? Why could any general practice want a technician who is advanced trained in fluid therapy, anesthesiology, clinical pathology? These are the domains of the veterinarian," end quote. And so these are constant, and a history of over 50 plus years where technicians have been held back. And I want to see how this motivation helps technicians is the VPA is through legislation. It can help with these things. It can make veterinary state boards turn different, as opposed to we only have one technician on a state board, which I mind you, 25 states do not have a technician representation on their board. And the VPA role gives us a different level to attain to. It gives us something more, with also giving title protection and different coverages. The reason we're not keeping technicians, we're not retaining them. We keep them from being able to own hospitals. And all this is legislation wise, and why I consume my life in legislation for veterinary technicians. And it's all, we can't own a veterinary hospital, and specific to veterinary technicians, not just lay people. So a lay person could own a veterinary hospital, but a veterinary technician can't. And these are all systemic values that go against technicians and why we have this problem in the first place. And there was the same hoopla against veterinary technicians, and then the same story that you're hearing now, this fear of non-veterinarians. In 2023, when we tried to advance veterinary technician specialists in the state of Arkansas, we went against AVMA, and we promoted that a veterinary technician specialist could have an advanced scope of practice, and that was in House Bill 1182, and we were able to be successful in that. So veterinary technician specialists are practicing at a mid-level kind of range in the state of Arkansas right now. But you don't hear about those kind of things because it's kept from you. So that's the reason that I come and advocate for veterinary technicians in this space, is because it's systemically been held against us, and the VPA role helps us advance in many different ways besides the one route you're seeing and the one route that's being fed to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. I find it really interesting that view that you have there, and I think it's prior to this, I did a lot of reading on, like I said, the human healthcare side of things, and a lot of those same roadblocks were placed for the RN role. Yeah, and that was a very interesting one to dig into. I want to take our time here. We only have a few minutes left. I want to ask one more section about patient safety. That's something that a lot of people have concerns over, and I'm glad that we have concerns over it, because ultimately, if we're not doing good patient care, we're, shouldn't be here. So there's a comment here from Dr. Sandra Fay, who's the AVMA president. Gail, I think you know her. What she said was, the proposed training for this position is completely inadequate and will lead to missed or delayed diagnoses, ineffective treatment, and repeat visits, all of which lead to more suffering for the animal and increased costs for the client. Thoughts? I know that's not a direct question, but it's a pretty bold statement as I view it. It seems as if we're saying just one style of care will cause additional ripple effects, and perhaps, on both sides of it, I'd love to hear what you each have to think about that. Yeah, Ashley.
While skepticism is natural in any new initiative, just as with the history of NAPTA, we showed how there's skepticism in each part of our history. So it's natural with any new initiative. It's essential to assess the evidence and the framework of the VPA role objectively. So VPAs are designed and complement veterinarians. They're not going to replace them, and improve access, efficiency, and outcomes in the field struggling with overwhelming demand. And constructive dialogue is critical to refining this role, but blanket dismissals without considering the details and overlooking the solutions it offers will only cause more challenges.
So just to grab on one thread that you said there, and I think everyone probably can hit on this a bit. what is the expectation of the supervising DVM for a VPA?
So I can give my perspective. I mean,
Yep.
the supervising DVM is going to essentially work in a quality control function. I mean, the students will be trained, but in the end, the DVM is still responsible for patient care. So they're not going to delegate something that they're not confident that that individual has the competence to perform. All right. And so that's going to change over time. As that VPA works for that DVM, they're going to become, just like new graduate DVMs become more competent. So will the VPAs. So the DVM's role is to only delegate those things that are competent in the competence of that individual. And I would say, well, Ashley's got her hand up. I could stop there.
No, go ahead, Wayne, because I have a follow-up question for you before I let Ashley go. I'm sorry to jump you.
Well, go ahead with your follow-up.
Well, my follow-up question, and I think, Link, this might be something a lot of the VMG members, being independent practices, have been concerned about. Will the DVM need to be on site for that VPA to practice, or will this be the similar case we've seen for some? I love telemedicine. I'm going out there and saying it. Mark it down. Cancel me, whatever you want. But there are practices, there are telemedicine situations where you have one doctor with 38 licenses, and every single person is working under that one DVM's license, and they're not even in that state. Is that something we are fearing or expecting to see within VPAs?
I mean, it's a great question, but that's also a question that will be addressed by the state boards of veterinary medicine. So when Prop 129 passed in Colorado, it's now up to the state board to put the guardrails around it. And I would expect those guardrails to be such as, no veterinarian can supervise more than X number of VPAs, because, you wouldn't want to have one veterinarian supervising 50 VPAs. Similarly, they're going to define and say, okay, for these activities, it needs to be immediate supervision, meaning the veterinarian's right there. These other activities, direct. And then there could be some that would be indirect supervision. It would depend on what the activities. But state boards of veterinary medicine will take input from all the stakeholders and define what those rules, and that's what it should be. And remember that the state board, their obligation isn't to, unlike the AVMA, their obligation isn't to preserve the authority of the DVM. Their obligation is for public health and public safety. So that's what they'll be focused on, and I have confidence that they'll do the right thing. I'd also say that, when you look at clinical cases, it's like anything. It lights on a bell-shaped curve. There's uncomplicated things and there's complicated things. If we're going to say that uncomplicated things can't be managed by individuals with less education, then why aren't we requiring all cases to be seen by specialists? Because the DVM is on that spectrum as well, right? VPAs will be referring to DVMs in an in-house referral, just as DVMs refer to specialists when it's outside of their capabilities.
Ashley, I'm going to hand it to you, but I want to make sure I'm giving Link and Gail an opportunity to respond to any of those things if there was something. Go ahead.
Yes. I just want to say, from being on a veterinary state board, that we look, like, say, a given case, a lot of veterinarians are worried that this would, it's going to be my license, it's going to be this. So we fully intend for VPAs to hold liability insurance, but as a state board, we look at things. So say there's a case with a veterinarian and a veterinary technician. If the veterinarian did everything in the scope and under the Practice Act, we don't go after the veterinarian. We go after the one who caused the malpractice. And so I just wanted to say that perspective from a state board that I've dealt with many a times, and that's the situation that will go in Colorado.
Gail, Link, any additional things that should happen there?
So I think it's and kind of following up on Ashley's comment, it's important to understand, and under the way that this current paradigm has been proposed, the veterinarian is actually responsible for all the acts that veterinary professional associate would do, and also anything that veterinary professional associate might not do that they should have done. And uncomplicated cases, I can tell you from experience in clinical practice, can become complicated very quickly. And so, for example, one of the procedures that has been suggested for the veterinary professional associate is a spay. Spays can go south very quickly, and oftentimes that's not only the surgery itself, but it can be the anesthesia. In this particular situation, that veterinary professional associate would not be able to deviate from a protocol that had been developed by the supervising veterinarian, specifically with respect to drugs. So if that animal had an anesthetic issue, that veterinary professional associate could not address that issue without involving the veterinarian. If that veterinarian isn't immediately reachable, they cannot respond to that particular issue. So not only do we have a situation where potentially we have an individual who doesn't have the same exposure to the science, to the clinical information, to the clinical practicum that a DVM has after completing their program, by law, they are not able to do some of the functions that are necessary in order to safely care for patients. And so when we're talking about fear, actually, we're not talking about fear of advancement of veterinary technicians. AVMA has many initiatives focused on this. Where our fear is putting insufficiently trained individuals into practice with potential harm for our patients, and depending upon what the situation is, potentially food safety and public health. That's where the fear is.
I would just underscore that. I hired 8 recent graduates this summer, and there's a significant learning curve after, even if you're completing a 4-year veterinary program and lots of surgical experience in the shelter environment. And for many of those individuals, they still require a significant period of time to acquire the clinical competency that they really need to function effectively, particularly when we're talking about surgery. And spays and neuters are significant surgeries. Dental extractions, same story. So I share that concern about the inadequate training relative to veterinarians.
And just one other thing I might mention, comparing the VPA to the physician's assistants and advanced practice registered nurses, there's a very big difference. In human medicine, we are not talking about those individuals having the scope of practice of a physician. Those individuals are not, for example, doing major surgeries. That is very different from what we're talking about for this particular position. You're talking about this individual with less than a third of the clinical exposure of a veterinarian doing major surgeries, and that should be a concern for everyone.
So can I address that? Because Gail, you've mentioned that several times, less than a third, and that's not accurate. When you look at the contact hours in our program focused on surgery, so preclinical, there's 108 hours in this program of surgical training, contact hours. In our DVM program, it's 105 hours of preclinical surgical training. And now you say, well, that's preclinical. Well, these individuals are going to go out and do a 540-hour internship. Well, you're right. The 4th year of vet school is more, but guess what? In the community practice where they're in our CSU, where they're actually doing surgeries, it's not that much. It's less than that. Now, if you include all the I'm watching an orthopedic surgeon do an orthopedic surgery, fair enough. But we're not going to be asking these individuals to do orthopedic surgery. They're going to be doing what we're going to ask them to do, and their clinical experience is going to be equal to or greater than the graduate DVMs in what we're asking them to do. So it's not less than a third, it's equivalent to.
Yes, and the dentistry portion is 62 contact hours as compared to 28 with DVMs.
I know we're still hitting on some tough things there. I know we're up on time, but I wanted to ask you all one final question. And what I also am going to do, we're going to leave the chat open for people that want to continue to chat in the YouTube chat as well. We'll let our panelists go on with their busy days. But one question I want a yes or no. Do you expect to see other states follow Colorado's lead on this position? Gail?
So we expect that there will be efforts to try to do that. Will they follow Colorado's lead? I think that's a big question.
Link,
Yes, same story.
Ashley?
Yes, there was an initiative last year in Florida for the VPA role, and I assume it will be introduced again this year. So yes, it was happening.
And Wayne?
I've been contacted by legislatures from 3 states that have not been mentioned prior, and they are interested in doing something similar in their state.
So again, it's, we didn't come to a resolution. We have not solved the world, but I hope that we were able to perhaps shine light on questions people had, dispel concerns people had, or even maybe bring up other concerns that haven't been discussed before. Again, I want to thank all 4 of you for coming together with us. I also want to thank our sponsor, Covet, which is a world-class AI scribing tool. When I open up the chat here and leave it for people to talk, Covet's going to be sponsoring the chat because they're all about open and clear communication. And I'd love for people to, if you have time, stay in the chat and continue communicating on our YouTube chat. Again, to our panelists, thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to send out some follow-up things. If there's any super hot button questions that are looking for more answers, I'm going to make sure that we give everyone opportunity to respond to those via an email or via our Substack as well. So we will get more out, and thank you all for joining us on this very, very important topic.
And thank you, Ryan, for the opportunity for us to do so.
Yep. Thanks very much. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.